prologue to the Epic of Gilgamesh describes Gilgamesh as an exemplary king, brave in battle and wise in governing his city, Uruk. But in the introduction, it's revealed that Gilgamesh wasn't always loved by his people. In fact, he oppresses them. In the rising action, hearing the people's pleas, the goddess of creation creates a man who can balance the king's arrogance. She creates Enkidu, a huge hairy man who lives among the wild animals. And when Enkidu learns of the cruel king Gilgamesh, he rushes angrily to Uruk and he and Gilgamesh fight. But their anger fades as each realizes the other is his heart's companion, and they become the best of friends. One day, Gilgamesh announces his plan to travel to the Cedar Forest to kill its guardian, the monster Humbaba. After battling the heroes, Humbaba pleads for his life and then curses the men before the king cuts off his head. When he comes home, Ishtar, the goddess of sexual love, promises Gilgamesh wealth and power if he'll marry her. Instead, he insults her. Ishtar takes the bull of heaven to earth to kill Gilgamesh. Enkidu and Gilgamesh kill it easily. That night, after a feast, Enkidu has a terrible dream that the gods meet to punish him and Gilgamesh for offending the gods by killing Humbaba and the bull. Enlil decrees Enkidu must die. Gilgamesh laments and wanders the wilderness, mourning his friend, until he heads to find Utnapishtim, the only man to whom the gods have granted immortality, to learn how to escape death. In the climax of the epic, Utnapishtim explains to Gilgamesh how he and his wife became immortal in a long aside. In the falling action, Utnapishtim then sets a test for Gilgamesh. If he can stay awake for 7 days, perhaps the gods will grant him immortality. But exhausted, Gilgamesh falls asleep instantly and sleeps for 7 days. In the resolution, Gilgamesh and Urshanabi depart for Uruk, and Gilgamesh proudly shows off his city to Urshanabi. He has become a wise king who appreciates his mortality and his people. There are 7 superhuman central characters in the Epic of Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh is an oppressive tyrant whose people obey him out of fear when the epic begins. But friendship with Enkidu teaches him to love, and Enkidu's death helps him understand what matters in mortal life. Stubborn and persistent, Gilgamesh fails to achieve his goal, immortality, yet finds a great treasure in his city and its people. Enkidu is Gilgamesh's near equal in size and strength, but perhaps because of his time among the animals, he's more attuned to the risks in the environment and more sensitive to the gods of nature. His cautious mindset curbs Gilgamesh's impetuous actions, and when it comes to battle, he's as courageous as the king himself. Utnapishtim, also called the Distant One, is the only man to attain immortality. It was a gift from the gods in exchange for his obedience during the Great Flood. Although he's old and wise, Utnapishtim is also demanding and impatient of Gilgamesh's quest. Ishtar, daughter of Anu, is a goddess and princess whose worship takes the form of sexual love. Her priestesses offer themselves willingly and joyfully to men, and her devotee Shamat tames Enkidu. But for Ishtar, sexual pleasure is never enough. Jealous and easily displeased, Ishtar becomes an enemy to every lover in the end. Siduri keeps the tavern in the Garden of the Gods. She appreciates life's joys, appropriately enough since she's the goddess of wine and beer. Her practical seize-the-day advice for Gilgamesh celebrates human pleasures and friendships, but she can't restrain the king's obsession to cross the ocean and find immortality. Shamat, as priestess of Ishtar, worships the goddess in the sexual act. Like all of Ishtar's priestesses, she enjoys sex and is trained in lovemaking. Not only does she tame Enkidu, but also teaches him what it is to live among people. She awakens in him the longing for a friend. Urshanabi is a practical, hard-working boatman who adapts quickly to changing situations, a good trait to have for anyone dealing with Gilgamesh in his wild grief. The narrator doesn't say how many years Urshanabi has lived serving Utnapishtim, but he willingly leaves to join the citizens of Uruk. Uruk, monsters, the hero's journey, and the number 7 are the key symbols in the Epic of Gilgamesh. The city of Uruk symbolizes Gilgamesh's transformation from cruel to wise king, and represents the achievements of his subjects. Before his transformation, Gilgamesh treats his subjects as his personal labor force, given to him to sate his desires. His people cry out to the gods for help. By the epic's end, the king recognizes his own mortality, becoming Uruk's ruler as well as its servant. He rebuilds the temples and carves new roads through the hills. He becomes the shepherd the gods assign him to be and makes his city a legend. Monsters symbolize Gilgamesh and Enkidu's desire for fame and power, especially when this desire runs counter to what the gods want. Humbaba and the Bull of Heaven both entangle the heroes in a dangerous web of mortal desires versus God's desires. The Scorpion people can help or hinder Gilgamesh if he's bold enough to approach them, and the Stone Men's destruction represents his lack of mastery of his own desires and emotions. Monsters can serve as symbols not only of what the hero seeks, but how the hero's flaws trip him up. The Epic of Gilgamesh, as the oldest story known, demonstrates that the hero's journey has been a symbol for self-knowledge and transformation for ages, and one that should not be undervalued. The hero's journey begins when a hero is called to an adventure in some way, may or may not accept or try to refuse the call, and embarks on the journey, usually with aid from supernatural beings or a wise mentor, and often joined by a companion who travels all or some of the road with him. The hero endures trials that teach them what they need to know for the next stage of the quest, and faces temptations to give up. Finally, 7 is an important and symbolic number in the epic. The number represents completeness, and may be based on the 7 heavenly bodies, sun, moon, and 5 planets visible to the naked eye, the Sumerians believed affected their lives and for whom the 7 major gods are named. Shamat and Enkidu make love for 7 days, and Gilgamesh mourns and weeps for Enkidu for 7 days, hoping to bring about a magical or divine cure for his brother and friend. Balance and order, fame and mortality, and heroism and hubris are the central themes in the Epic of Gilgamesh. The theme of balance and order is both overt and covert in Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh is outsized and extreme. The king's power should enhance the city. Instead, because he's so extreme, so unbalanced, Gilgamesh is preying on Uruk. Enkidu is the wild man associated with nature and animals. He has no language and is a true shepherd to the herds. When Gilgamesh and Enkidu meet, they balance each other out. The city meets the natural world. The predator meets the protector. Unjust king meets just servant. Turns out, the sooner Gilgamesh accepts the divine order, the sooner he can find contentment. Another important theme, fame and mortality. Epic heroes often seek fame to establish their names and deeds so no one forgets them after they die. Fame keeps memory alive, and since mortals must die, fame is a substitute for immortality. So it is for Gilgamesh as he plans the attack on Humbaba. Everyone advises him against it, yet Gilgamesh is determined to stamp my fame on men's minds forever. Honestly, given that the epic is still read thousands of years later, Gilgamesh pretty much succeeded. But the question suggested by the epic is what the price of that fame was. The cost to Gilgamesh is high. He pays with his grief for Enkidu. One way in which he tries to address this question is by pursuing the secret to immortality. He eventually embraces his mortality, ready to live in the moment, contently. Finally, there's heroism and hubris. Gilgamesh is the hero of the story, but he's far from perfect. The epic hero walks a blurred line between bold courage and reckless pride. That pride, or hubris, is Gilgamesh's undoing. Hubris is a dangerous form of excessive pride that goes beyond pleasure and satisfaction in one's achievements or joy in the good fortune of those one loves. It leads a hero to behave with too much confidence. Epics often teach young listeners what their culture expects of them, so the smacking down of one hero's hubris isn't just a plot point, it's a moral lesson. Prophetic Dreams and Capricious Gods are the key motifs in the Epic of Gilgamesh. Dreams weave their way through Gilgamesh and are always prophetic and frequently attributed to the gods. Dreams function as a way for the gods to communicate a glimpse into the future, but the dreams are rarely clear and require interpretation. Some dreams come unbidden, as when Gilgamesh dreams of the flaming boulder that lands at his feet. This dream is a prophecy for the coming of Enkidu, his dear companion. Now, Gilgamesh doesn't know when he has this dream that he needs this companion or that Enkidu even exists. But because Shamat reports the dream to Enkidu, both men begin to feel the pull toward their future friendship. In other cases, characters seek out dreams when they need guidance. Gilgamesh does so repeatedly, and Enkidu, fortunately, is a fantastic interpreter of dreams. The dreams are part of the epic's mystery as well, full of rituals, prayers, amulets, and divine presences that sustain an atmosphere of the supernatural. Capricious Gods is the other main motif. Throughout the epic, Gilgamesh and Enkidu both benefit and suffer from the gods' interventions in their adventures. The difficulty of pleasing the gods is a problem in other ancient mythologies as well. However, in ancient Greek myths, the gods are at least predictable. Hera is always jealous and suspicious. Ares is always aggressive. Athena has her prickly pride. Humans at least know the rules the gods expect them to follow and how the gods will react if they break those rules. But this isn't the case for the Sumerian gods, who, tied so closely to nature, made change as quickly as the weather. Even those gods most inclined to help humans can't be counted on to do so consistently. When, for example, Gilgamesh decides to kill Humbaba, readers see a contradiction. Enlil, who governs the gods' assembly, assigned Humbaba the task of protecting the sacred forest from mortals. Yet Shamash, god of the sun, assists Gilgamesh and Enkidu in the fight. And although Gilgamesh is the son of a goddess, the assembly of the gods will not speak for him as they did for Utnapishtim. The gods are interwoven into Sumerian life, but they are not to be depended on.